Was at that point in time, right, when you were younger, was Singapore an important batik production center at all?
No, not at all. You know, it was not until uh, the 60s or or mid 60s or mid 70s that there were few producers of batik that come to Singapore. And for example, if I can mention name is, for example, like Dressler of Design Batik, Sia Kim Ju, and Kiat, yeah, Mrs. Kiat. So they produce batik in Singapore, and they get their workers from Indonesia as well as from Malaysia, Kelantan and Terengganu. And this is how they do, because by that time, batik has become more popular, yeah, among the community, not only here but elsewhere, like Japan, Europe, and so on. So that is how batik at that time flourished. Yeah. And talking about flourish, I think Singapore was the place that was a center of trade, so trading center of the region. And because of that, many people from all over the world that come to Singapore would see and appreciate batik, and that is how it became popular.
So, okay, there was a, I mentioned that day, there was a news report in the newspaper at that time, it's called New Nation. So, around 1979, Sakim Ju opened a batik manufacturing factory. At first, he did batik art in the 60s, and then in the 70s, he turned to creating a batik manufacturing factory in Pasir Panjang. And he said in this news article that he wanted his batik to have to create a Singapore flavor. And then the things that they made is no longer art. It's about fashion dress and accessories, household decorating. Do you think that still has a spirit of batik? Can that kind of product be called batik?
Sia was doing works of batik because his workers were all from imported workers, either Malaysia or Indonesia. Now, when these workers work in his factory, they are still using a block, although they may not be doing handwritten, but they still use block. With this block, there are some depicting the culture, the Indonesian culture. So I think that is batik still, even though technically it's done in a different way, but still resisting with that. Yes, orchids. I think everybody was doing orchids at that time, you know. You have orchid skirts, orchid blouse, all orchid, because that what sell. Even Shahab exported batik products to Florida that later on shipped to the Caribbean. Yeah, it's by containers. By container, it's not 1,000 pieces. No, by container, one container, two container. So it's like that. So that's how business was. And this business, well, they are taking this opportunity as to do the business, like Siakim Ju, Dressler, I think Quack and so on. So they do take this opportunity to mix. And to the others that has factory for tourists to visit, it's like gold mine. Where the batik was still wet, the Japanese will buy, and at a very good price. I know them. I was with Rufino Lee has got a factory. What's the factory's name? I was with him. I mean, you wouldn't believe it. All deal in cash. Yeah, because they are tourists. They don't sign checks, so all deal in cash. And you pull a drawer, it's all cash. So that's what. So they just open and then get the money, and that's what they are interested in. The worker, the sales girl Rufino gave is one holiday in a year and can choose where you would want to have a holiday. You can choose, anywhere, he will sponsor. That much amount of business that he did. And then it stopped. When it stopped, he had a diamond factory. So you see how that business goes on,
But would they be producing in a similar way than, say, a workshop in Jogja for the factory in Singapore?
Yes.
Similar
Production
way?
is similar, yeah.
Okay.
But I think we produce faster than Indonesia
How come?
at that time. Most of the workers that were from Indonesia and Malaysia, they are by contracts. So they get paid by pieces. So they'll do more work than because they get. But in Indonesia, you get like salary. And salary, you just do, and I think that is the attitude of workers in Indonesia. Just take their own time to do, because which they are right. It's not something that you must, but it is something that you enjoy, So that's how the Indonesians, they enjoy working, because the ladies that are doing hand-drawn can sit down from, I think, 6 o'clock till about 4 o'clock in the afternoon. They just sit down and then do their work. Even their body even turns, that way when they stand up, because this person is doing batik, so because they are doing that way when they go. So that's that, and at their own good time, and really enjoy it, like in trance. They can sit down hours and hours and hours, until when the dark start coming, then they stop. But that's how it is. But here, the Malaysian, they just block, color, block, wash, it's messy.
Why do you think batik art went out of fashion by the 70s?
I think the batik artists that practice doing batiks are very considerate. Singapore is aware about our cleanliness. There are other factories that also close because it's not clean. Especially with batik, when we are using intoxicated chemical and colors. And when this color of water, when this colored water goes into the drain, even Singapore River can change into color. So our government is very, very aware of our hygienical, and also cleanliness. So you cannot. If your car gets certain amount of smokes, you have got to go to send to the, So we are very, very, the government is trying to get it, to get it right. So, lots of batik artists cannot practice in Singapore. We dirty the drain. That's definitely, you can see, even the grass by the drain become green and suddenly all gone, So by using the naphtol dyes, which is the original dyes, is not applicable in Singapore. You can do it somewhere else. You can walk in somebody's garden, but don't walk on our grass. That's how they don't, because we take care of our grass. How many gardeners are taking care of the grass? So watering. So you don't. You do it somewhere else if you want. You can do it if it is free from all the hygienical. You can. So artists that do like me, small pieces, that can do at home, yes.
Can you tell us what is the meaning of abstraction for you in your art? And then for people who are, say, untrained or not familiar with art, right? How can they understand the abstraction in your artwork?
I think it needs time to, for the community as to understand as how the artists develop their works, and that is also supposed to be how the community should understand. I mean, if they do, then they know when I started, I do works reflecting the work that I see. For example, if it is an apple, and I'll draw an apple. When I do painting, I look at leaves. Sometimes I look at it, what color is the leaf, because the leaves also has got purple, got yellow, got red, everything. So I'm thinking about that. The moment I look at it, why this leaf is different color from that leaf? So these are things which is always in my mind as to what happened, and who is the one who changing the color, and what does it needs to have a strong color, and so on and so forth. These are the abstractions that I have.
Related to this question, and earlier on you started with, painting a more kind of realistic and or even impressionistic subject matters, like the Singapore River and kampong scenes. And uh, and these are more kind of I think maybe landscape kind of pictures. Do you remember at what point you began to focus on nature as a subject matter in your art? And was there a reason why you moved towards painting nature or becoming more focused on nature as a subject matter?
I think all along I've been interested with nature, and I believe that I'm part of it. Yeah, it will take changes, as it goes on, and I'm also the same as plants, where to a certain time I move to another place, or to do, instead of charcoal, do watercolor, and so it developed by itself. I mean, importantly is what is available. For me, to paint, not necessarily to have, easel, brushes, watercolor paint. For me, to paint, whatever can be used to sketch or draw, that's what I would do. So I let nature to develop my thought of what can be used as to present my feeling. So that's why, I mean, I use clay as watercolor. I use clay to do some sort of sculpture and so on. And I use anything wood, brown paper. I use anything that is available. I can still remember one day I was strolling along at Kallang River, So I saw a lot of people are doing watercolor painting with their board, yeah, paper and so on. They'll do that. So I just walk and I just look around, and I remember this very well. I can picture in myself. Chu Keng Kwang approached me and give me paper to draw. So what am I going to do with the paper? Huh? He has given me the paper. So I just continue walking, and I saw charcoal, of the burned wood, because they are burning, tongkang and so on. So I take that and I start to sketch with that. And I remember that I think he's happy. Yeah, I don't wait for watercolor or some other artist that to borrow their watercolor. No, I just use whatever I can get on the beach, and that's how And I think that's how I met Chu Keng Kwang at that time. Yeah.
I want to ask you about batik because your batik technique is as a fine art technique. It is not exactly the same as a traditional kind of batik painting or traditional batik technique. I mean, of course, there are elements which is the same, but because your work is a bit abstracted, it's a different application of the technique. How should a viewer differentiate between batik as a technique and batik as motif?
Well, batik, either motifs or techniques, it is an abstraction of technique, abstractions of subject. And I became much more aware is because batik is related to nature. The world of our batik, my batik, they are flora and fauna, so that's what they do. So that is how I became much more aware of it. And that is subject, and the technique itself, it has been abstract. Yeah, all the presentations of them, they are related to abstractions. Yeah. Although they are naturalistic, but the abstraction, it's just like water. It's just like Chinese. What they do is just to symbol of water. It's just like the Chinese, where you have got two lines and also there's water, and so many works of traditional art use symbolic. So symbolic itself is an abstraction. They use symbol. Mountains, they use mountain like that. But in batik, mountain, they just use one line, but it's slanting that way. And then what do we have in mountain? Then we have plant, flowers, or whatever. So the sea, we have sea life and so on and so forth. So this is, I think, an abstraction where I am much more towards abstracting of my work. So every now and then, even though I may still do some realistic, but in the realistic of my work, there is always abstractions in the presentation. So that's how I became much more towards abstractions. In the first place, when I'm doing batik, it's not the result, it's not the work, but it's the technique. So in any techniques, oil, watercolor, anything, it has got to be the idea, the ideology of what you are painting. So this is what I'm doing, using technique and presenting my works, my perceptions into the artwork that I'm doing. Okay, the technique that I'm doing resisting, which is commonly known as batik. So that is not that I want to do batik and do abstraction, but I do abstraction using batik technique. Yeah, so that I think that's.
And I think the last time we spoke about your Javanese tradition, and then how batik, a lot of the traditional motif is Javanese as well. And then I think I remember we said something about how Malays, when we use batik, they pick on some of these motifs still, but then maybe the usage is not exactly the same as the original Javanese symbolism of the motif. Um, w- what are some of the motifs in batik that has disappeared from usage? And then maybe what are then the other popular motifs that continue to be used? So why do some motifs disappear, or why do some motifs continue?
I think batik motifs can also be depicting from other culture, the Chinese, and then religious, the Indian, the Christian, and these are work which is thousands of years ago, But when come to our region, then the Indonesians are the one who is familiar and then use it as a production for many other things. This batik actually came to the palace first, because they were used from the other region as a gift to the royal family. And after having been sort of mingled with that, then they decided as to have design which is depicting their culture. So you see that other culture also in batik. But in Indonesia, since they are the one who makes the work, then they use that sort of design or concept of design into the work of batik. So this is why you find that there's a lot of Hindu influence in batik. For example, the community use mango, in India. And we have mango motif traditional, which is called palam. Palam in Javanese is mango. So you see that sort of shape is like mango, yeah. And inside you have design and so on and so forth. The Indians also using that design. The Javanese also use design, but I don't know what it is called in India. But in Indonesia, it's called palam. So they call it palaman. So this is how that the traditional are actually of mixed design that been used. For example, we have the Ramayana and so on. It's being used in batik and being used in Java. And the Indonesian also has a mixed culture of Hinduism and also Islam. So they use both designs as to present their works. So, but as it develops, then slowly the Hindu sort of design, depicting the Hindu design, are being left. Yeah, and they continue because in Islam you cannot have people, animals, and so slowly it's moves. And now we can tell which is clearly which is the batik that has got Islam, and which is batik which has Hindu sort of concept. And hopefully that we will continue as to make ourselves much more clear in the designing that we do and in the process that it is of Malay, of Chinese, and of European. So slowly we are going into that. So then maybe by then we can call that it's a Muslim or Malay, it comes because they are Muslims design which has got animal, So this perception are still in the developing, process. As we are developing, the process is also concept is also developing, So that's I think I feel that.
Coming back to last week, 2 weeks ago when we first taped this, and then we were talking about how in your younger times, even Malay people in Singapore use batik for special occasions. And you only bring out your batik for special occasions, and then sometimes, if it's a special occasion and you don't have it, you also borrow the batik for that special occasion. But today, I think when we see, festive celebrations, we see people, yes, wearing the Malay baju, but then not. I don't think I see batik so often. In fact, it seems like the people who wear batik are either Ang Moh expats or Peranakan or our Chinese ministers. They like batik a lot. So why? Yeah. So why do you think that has changed? Why is batik not so important amongst this current generation of younger people?
Batik is material is as expensive as gold because we can pawn batik material. Not many are really thinking or have their thought into it. They know batik can be pawned, so they know it has got value. But what is the value? They never ask and they never try to understand. They will bring their batik material to the pawn shop and pawn the batik material. But they never think that there is none other who work in the pawn shop. I don't think there is a single Malay who is working in the pawn shop. All are Chinese. Yeah? And these Chinese are the one who look inside the batik. The reason is because they know the value. They can tell you bring one batik, okay, this is $10. Another person bring another, okay, this is $5. Meaning that they are aware of the value of batik. So, the non-Malays are more aware of what batik is. So that's how it developed. In the end, many of us don't know the value of batik, but the others knows the value of batik. The Japanese, the European, the Dutch, the Japanese, the Chinese, and so on, then they appreciate and they're the one who's using it, but we are the one who pawn all our batik or sells our batik to them. Maybe even 50s to about 70s, mid-70s, our economy is really down. So I think that's where they need. So the need of to buy or even to send their children to school and so on. So this is why they do. And they don't do it like every day. For example, I have 10 pieces of good batik. They know it is good and they know it's expensive. That's why they bring that to the pawn shop. But times, due to the time, they won't have any more. No, maybe 3 or 4 months they pawn one, 3 or 4 months, until they have no more batik in their collection. I still remember my time. I think it is maybe late 40s, yeah, and until 50s, 60s. The elderly of our community really take good care of batik. Every maybe a month, 2 months, or 3 months, they will dry, sort of air the batik, hang outside, and they call it even gross. Gross is a type of shell which is very fine that they will put the material on the table and they will press onto it. And the batik becomes softer and softer and it doesn't spoil the material. So they are aware and they really took care. But when come to the second generations after that, then they are not looking into it because our parents don't explain to us, don't tell us. So we don't know, no, just batik, or maybe at time when I don't have money and I know batik can be sold, so I'm just take the batik, sell the batik. But we don't know the value of batik because we are not taught and there are not very many books as to explain batik. And sometimes when they explain, is misconcept of explanation what batik is. So it becomes, I think Roja, we don't know which is which and what is what. So it becomes that way. So these are, I think, the main reason as to why our younger generations becoming more sort of they don't understand what batik is. So I think what I have been trying to do, whether it's an abstraction or naturalistic, is to make it understood by community. Other community talk about batik more than our community. Why? Is because the knowledge of batik is not being explained to them properly, especially publication. Now we have lots of publication, whether it is good or not, but I think it is essential as to have any publications about batik. So let us learn through this publication. So I feel that we are getting closer to the understanding of batik.
If we talk about the loss of knowledge of batik and the value of batik, how do people misunderstand or misuse batik today? Do people use motifs in the wrong way, or do they use batik inappropriately?
In many cases, the development of our knowledge is that we are more towards abstraction rather than the classical value or ethnic value, more than that. Because when they want to use batik, they look, first is when they look at the shelf, they look at the color, whether that color suits you or not. That's what the best thing. And they don't even go further as to what design, because it is more of fashion rather than the ethnic value of the work. So that is what is happening.
Do you wish for your abstract batik paintings to also your own painting, like your own art? Is it also a way to keep the batik tradition alive and to pass on batik tradition to subsequent generations?
Yeah, why I'm doing it is importantly is for them to understand that this technique exists. And what technique exists is resisting technique. It is called in here as batik. So first is to bring up that understanding to the society. And then after appreciating that, I feel that it's time for them as to think, how can that technique apply to our work? Yeah? And then if we are using batik, we would want to have some sort of value, some sort of indications that is related to the traditional batik. And I'm looking at it in that way. So it is the technique, and then how it is related to the traditional and so on. So I think that would bring the understanding of the community as to understand why it is, why I am doing batik.
Do you think that abstraction can be helpful to help people to understand nature? That maybe people don't think of it as a difficult thing to understand, but do you think that abstraction can be a channel to help people to see and appreciate nature better?
Yeah, I feel that is actually the purpose of abstraction. Doing an abstraction for self enjoyment, what does it mean? So it has certain value of educational, for the one who look at it as to understand. So this understanding can be presented in abstract painting if one wants to learn and one is being explained, because not many people will take a second thought of how, where, and so they don't. When they look at no entry, they won't go in. But that won't go in also to the cars or to bicycle or to J workers. They don't look into it, So these are things which we have got to teach them, not to have second thought. It's not the end of the world. There is no end of the world actually. You go to whatever we are doing. It's never the end of the world.
Looking at your artwork, that it can be very abstract and very contemporary in its expression, but can we say that in your artwork the technique and also the small symbolisms are actually also very traditional? Yeah. How would you describe your?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think reason as to why I put sort of traditional sort of value and also design into it, although it's not everything, is actually as to bring out the awareness of the society. That is why that I'm doing that. And in the long term, maybe they will understand. When I see people buy batik, as I say, they will look at colors, don't even look at the design. And there are some that using so-called batik with cards, playing cards on it. And for us, that is not relevant. How come a Muslim, use a playing card design onto it? But when it is not batik at all, it's been printed, and maybe because of its colors and some design, it depict theme batik, but it's not batik at all. So these are things which happen. No. For example, if the Chinese use design which is maybe understood as bad luck, now they will use that, and if they use that, then it's not relevant. And furthermore, using that at the functions of another Chinese occasion, then it's really not relevant. So these are the value that which I think we should actually bring them to the understanding.